I'm Ken VanDine. I wanted to talk a little bit about application security in Ubuntu. We've touched on this a number of times. I know Mike's mentioned app confinement. A lot of that is how we solve application security. And right now, these are the things we have in place on the phone. But as we move out to the snappy desktop and the convergence, will be. Is that feedback? All right. As we move on to the snappy desktop and convergent. Oh, it's right there. All right. Is that okay? Testing? Convergence. That seems to be the bad word here. Convergence. All right. So right now we have all this in place on the phone. And as we get into the snappy desktop and our convergence, filling out that convergent story, this will be what we see on the desktop as well. So in the application security, there's a few things we really care about controlling here. So access to content, access to hardware, and access to system resources. Things like background processes running, access to hardware like location service, so applications track where you are, things like that. We really care about that stuff. And these are the reasons why. Diminished user experience, something that's constantly using a bunch of CPU, dragging your phone down, using a lot of memory when it's not the active application. Draining your battery. Data protection, privacy. How many people have installed an Android app that required access to their contacts that really has nothing to do with contacts, like a flashlight program? Brightest flashlight. I don't know if you guys have heard the story of this one, but it's kind of famous. There was like 50 million downloads or some crazy number of this free flashlight app. And it requires GPS access for location, requires full network access. It can prevent your device from sleeping, install shortcuts. Crazy. But what this app was actually doing is in the background, it constantly reported your location associated with your Google account back to some remote server. And they were selling that marketing information. And the real no-no here, why they got sued by the FTC over this, was because they were correlating the location with the ID. It wasn't anonymous. The settlement they made, and this app is still available in the store, and it still does it, the Play Store, but the first time you run it, there is a nag screen that says, this is our privacy policy, please read it and accept it. If you click the next button, you no longer get asked again. And most people just click the next button. So this flashlight app that you use to see at night is tracking your application all the time. Even when you're not using the flashlight, it tracks where you are and reports back who you are, all the places you've been. Yes. It wouldn't get your precise location, but it also has approximate location above it. It's kind of hard to read on the slide here, but it can use network access to determine your location as well. So it won't be as precise, but it tracks that constantly. And when do you see this screen when you install an app on Android? Do you see it when you run it or when you install it? One time you see it when you install it, and most people never read them. They're going to be going to a model that's more similar to ours pretty soon with M. Yeah, they get to play catch up. Similar thing here, movietickets.com. Now, this one's not a malicious app. This is just one I happen to have installed. But it can read and modify my contacts. Why? Things like that. Just the location makes sense for this because I want to find movies that are close to me. So that's fine. It's not necessarily malicious, but almost every app you install wants to be able to read your contacts. That really bothers me. No, this one doesn't prevent your device from sleeping. That's another one that really burns me up. The Groupon one. This is one that I actually use, and it requires location. Makes sense. Most of these things make sense, but it also prevents your tablet from sleeping, and it can run in startup. So it starts up automatically. It doesn't use like a push notification service, so it can send you, here's a deal you might want to look at. Periodically, it's constantly running using your battery and talking to the network to poll for information to feed to you, and that bothers me. So what we do for application security, we achieve that with application confinement, which Mike talked about a little bit, trust store, I'll get into that a little bit more, and application lifecycle that Mike also mentioned, how we control what processes have processing resources on the device. So with application confinement, here's a little diagram that kind of illustrates it, but your app, every app that gets installed is bundled inside of this AppArmor profile, where AppArmor prevents access to things outside of the sandbox. It's literally a sandbox. It can't access anything that we don't allow it to access. So it can't access this other application's data. It can't access hardware bits of information that it's not allowed to. And this is where the trust store comes into. If it tries to access something like, say, your location, it will prompt you and the user at runtime when it needs it. Should I allow this? As opposed to at installation time. But running these things inside of this sandbox in a completely protected environment is how we're able to very rapidly get apps into our store. Because we can trust that these apps are going to be safe. Talking about content and confinement. So this is really about the data protection and privacy. All content is, and this is something that's been a little bit controversial, and that's some of the reasons why I want to talk about these, is all content is owned by an application. So there is no real notion of like a global place for all your photos to be stored on your device. If you have more than one gallery application, there could be different photos in different galleries, and you have to use those galleries to access that photo. And there are ways to share that content between those, but by default, App A cannot access content that's created by App B, not without you knowing it. That's the key here. Is there's ways that those apps can work together, but they can't happen without you knowing it. For example, an application that wants access to your contacts, like it seems like every Android app in the Play Store wants. These things are running in the background, and they look for new contacts that have been added, and maybe they're trying to associate your friends or reporting back information about who you know to their servers or whatever they're doing. They're doing these things in the background without you ever knowing they're accessing your contacts. In our model, with our confinement, in order for an application to access a contact, it literally says, I need to request some content, and it's of type contacts. And they get prompted saying, which application do you want to find your contacts in? And they'll get a little prompt, and he had a screenshot of that. I wish I had screenshots of that. I wrote it, and I didn't know screenshots of it. But you get prompted a little list of applications that support contacts. And chances are it's in the address book. You choose the address book, and you get a picking user interface. So it's not necessarily the same user interface. It's similar as the normal way you go into the address book, but you'll get a UI that'll let you select contacts that you want to give back to that other application. So the application that's requesting it never directly accesses your address book. It tells you as a user, you're going to go get this from the address book. And the address book that owns those contacts provides the user interface for selecting them and handing those contacts back over. So as a user, you're driving the user interface of them when they get those contacts, as opposed to something in the background just mining your contacts. And this is true for all types of contacts. The same thing for pictures. If you have an application that wants to open a picture to upload it to Facebook, maybe you want to edit it, draw some goofy mustaches and stuff on Mike's picture and then upload it to Facebook, you can have an app that does this. Pick a picture. It'll find all the sources that on your phone for pictures, like the gallery app, import that, edit it, and then share it out to the Facebook app. And none of those apps directly access content from the other app. They ask each app to hand it off to them and hand it off to them. And this is how they work with the sandbox. So the Content Hub provides a bridge for the sandbox to get content. So now we'll get into the Trust Store. Now, Trust Store is a little bit different. So this is another mechanism. We call them trusted handlers for trusting an application to access some information. Now, this will never be content from other applications, and it won't actually be accessing other applications. It'll be accessing resources on the device, like maybe your GPS for location service. So an app needs to know your location. At runtime, and it actually only does it one time, we don't nag you every time, but it asks you, says this application has requested access to location. And you can allow it or deny it. And not only can you allow it or deny it now, but if you decide later on that you no longer want to allow this app to have access to your location, you can go into our settings UI and see a list of all the apps that have access to the location and turn it off. Same thing for the camera. If you don't want to have an application that has access to your camera anymore, you can turn it off at any time. An application should handle this and know how to deal with that. So these are the ways we protect these things from using like the location behind your back. Another thing which I'm a huge fan of is our application lifecycle. Right now on the phone, and this will change a little bit as we get into the desktop, but there's only a single application that can be focused on the display at one time on the phone. And that's the only application that uses any processing. Applications get paused when they're no longer used, and they're not running. That way they're not consuming processor time or draining your battery. And over time, as you need more memory, we'll kill these old applications, completely stop them, because maybe you haven't used it in a long time, it drops down in the stack. But when we get into desktop convergence, we'll have multiple apps will be able to have focus at the same time. Well, I'm sure these rules will be modified a little bit for that. And here's a visual for that. So you'll see the top app on the stack is the current focused one. That's the only one that's running. And we'll pause as many applications under that stack as we can until we need more memory. And then the least used one will get dropped. It'll get completely stopped to free up RAM. Trusted helpers, which I mentioned. So the Content Hub is how we bridge the content between applications. And by bridging content, I mean we can export content from an app, say kind of like the open with type example. So I have an image in my gallery app, and I want to open it with this other application that can edit a photo. That's like open with. So that sends data to this other application. There's a picking operation, which is where I have an app that needs to pick a photo from the gallery app. So it opens it up, that lets them select a photo, pull it back down to this app. And then that app can do what it needs to with that content. And there's also sharing. So if you want to take a picture in the gallery app, say I want to share this, it'll find sources that you can share it externally to other people, like, for example, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. In the future, we'll have things like other devices like Bluetooth. So you want to send something to a Bluetooth device, you'll do the same thing with Content Hub. But this is all within that sandbox. So the Content Hub is the way to get content out via a trusted helper. Media Hub is also a trusted helper, and I've definitely missed some here. But Media Hub is how, Mike mentioned this earlier, it's how your application can continue playing even when it's paused. So if you have a playlist from your application, say a Pandora stream, you want to continue listening to your music, once your application loses focus, it's no longer using any of your CPU cycles. But with the Media Hub handling the playback for you, that doesn't matter anymore. It's got the stream, it knows how to play it, and it just plays it. URL dispatcher, this is how you open other applications. So it's a trusted way to say, hey, find an application that can open this content. Online accounts for finding accounts that you want to maybe share to, Facebook, whatever. And I think you mentioned one earlier too that I have forgotten here. Download manager, yes. So an application can just say, I need to download something, but maybe it's a 4 gig file or something crazy like that. You're not going to have that app focused on your phone for that period of time. It'll just hand it off to download manager, and then it doesn't matter what happens to your app. It's going to be great to have on the desktop. All of these things are going to be. It's just taking us time to get there. So pretty much all I have. Basically, you shouldn't worry about your apps and what app developers are doing to you. You should be able to install apps out of the store and just be happy. Not worry about what the evil developers on the other end are doing with these apps. Any questions? Yes.
I'm sorry. So are you presenting the fact that there's an application that allows for all of this blocking of information?
Right now, our platform prevents it. So when you install an application out of the Click Store on a phone today, it by default is completely locked down. It can't access any of these things no matter how hard the app developer tries because it's blocked at the kernel level.
Okay, is there a GUI interface or a user control over which ones that
No.
you agree to or would
Well,
like
that's the trust store can. So depending on the type of access, like an application wants to access the location information, it'll prompt you automatically. The platform does it for you. You don't have an app developer. As an app developer, you don't have to think about this. It'll automatically prompt the user, do you want to allow it or deny it?
Right. But you don't have an interface that lines up all the applications that are running, and you can select which ones you decide not to. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
well, location we do. You can go back and turn them all off. Yeah, we do have a UI that'll show you all the apps that have access to location, and you can turn them off anytime. We do have that. But as far as like the content stuff and things like that, it's much more complicated. They're completely locked down. They have very limited. They can only write data and read data from their own app space, and they don't have access to anything outside of their space.
Does the Content Hub remember yet approvals? Like if I say I want to give this app access to this content all the time without having to be reprompted.
No, and it won't ever do that.
It won't ever do
It might remember. So we'll have a notion of a favorite. It's like you often choose this peer. It might bubble up to the top, but it still always needs to drive through that other application's user interface. So it'll never just hand off that application's content. But we do want to have a heuristic there to say this is the most common app.
If I do want my app to be able to continue access,
Mm-hmm.
and I can copy it to somewhere my app can access it directly once I've gotten approval from the content.
No. Maybe we can do something interesting with content stores on that someday. Talk to me about it later. We'll think about it. Yes.
Are there any chances of a notification hub for push notifications? Because that's something that, not just push notifications with the users displayed anything, but if I have a web service, for example,
Mm-hmm.
when a user registers to the web service, let's just say I'm creating a social networking app,
Mhm.
that I can push content to the user.
Mhm. We have that today. It works. We have
Oh,
it.
it works?
Yep. Twitter does it. Gmail does it. Let's wait for the mic.
And on your security model, how do you handle like advertising, things like that, like ad banners and?
Well, that would be essentially network access, right? So most often those applications are pulling that data down via the network and displaying it within their app. So that application, as long as it requests access to the network, so when Mike was showing when he set up the project in your manifest, you could say these are all the policies I want to allow access to. If you allow network, it can pull down its own ad information and display it inside their own app. You just can't push them to anybody else, any other apps. Does that answer your question? Or?
Well, I was thinking more about like targeted advertising and things like that.
So that would have to essentially pull some identity information from the user, right? So like, for example, like Google always tracks who you are and what you've searched for on the web and can target ads to you based on your browsing, right?
Well, yeah, you do not necessarily need personally identifiable information, but you do need certain criterias that are available so that the advertisers can target.
Yeah, it needs to have some way of identifying. Maybe it doesn't tie back to you, but saying this is the user that likes these things to send more targeted ads. We don't really have anything that would allow that sort of thing, because essentially what you would need is like, say, browser history access or something like that, right? You're right. I mean, or some sort of access to the browser, and apps don't have any sort of access to that right now.
The web view in your app, it's going to use a separate context and history and cookies than what the actual browser uses.
Right. There's no way for an app to have any sort of access to anything that's been done in the browser. I know this is how a lot of app developers make their money.
So the platforms that you're talking that all this stuff is going to exist on is a phone, the tablet, and the laptop, ultimately?
Ultimately, yeah. Today it's just the phone.
And the phone's only available in Europe at this point, except for the Nexus as we talk.
Yeah.
So let's shoot for the American market a little bit here. A tablet coming out. I mean, is
This would all be on the tablet
in a year? I mean, are you
whenever there's a
setting-
device? But actually, so the Snappy Desktop is targeted for 1604, right? 1510. So the Snappy Desktop that anybody could download and install would have all of this built into it.
the desktop?
Yeah, on the desktop. So on like your laptop, you can install it and
Okay. How will this work? I like Ubuntu. I started off with it. I've moved on to Mint, which is, I guess, using some portions or parts of.
it's a modified version of Ubuntu.
So will Mint pick up on any of this, or would they lose or benefit?
It would
from
be up to them.
So
I mean, a lot of this is very tightly integrated to the Unity 8 shell, Mir, these sorts of things that the other distros aren't going to pick up on right away. So
because X11 will let one app read the screen or keyboard inputs or mouse inputs to another. So that's a huge security hold there that all of our app confinement is based around that not being there. So this all works on Mir, but it will not work on X11.
but we will have we will have Xmir, which will run inside of a separate container, and everything inside of that container. This is how we'll support for Snappy Desktop what we're calling legacy apps, but applications that were written with the old paradigm, like for example LibreOffice, things like that aren't necessarily running on Mir yet natively and interacting with our APIs. They'll all run inside of a single Xmir container, and we'll have some legacy helpers for getting content between new apps and the old apps until all the more common apps are, really using. So then they'll all run inside their own sandbox, but not individual sandboxes. So like GIMP and LibreOffice would have access to the same files. Yes.
So what is the cost of what you have to offer at this time?
What do you mean by the cost?
Is there a cost for like downloading this?
No, it's free.
Totally free.
You just need you need an Ubuntu phone, which will work on a Nexus 4. You can install it yourself today if you want. If you have your own Nexus 4. The software is free.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have a number of questions. Who asked the best question? Okay. So how many should I give away? 2 shirts or one Arduino and a shirt? Let's see. Arduino, the guy who asked about the targeted ads, was a good question. Unless you'd rather have a shirt. Arduino or shirt? Okay. I'm glad I asked then. I'm glad I asked. But you didn't ask a question. You did ask a question. Push notification guy.
Your customers rely on your website or application. If it's slow or non-responsive, it infuriates your users and costs you money. Keeping your business-critical systems humming along requires insight into what they're doing. Your system metrics tell stories that can reveal performance bottlenecks, resource limitations, and other problems. But how do you keep an eye on all of your system's performance metrics in real time and record this data for later analysis? Enter Longview, the new way to see what's really going on under the hood. The Longview dashboard lets you visualize the status of all your systems, providing you with a bird's-eye view of your entire fleet. You can sort by CPU, memory, swap, processes load, and network usage. Click a specific system to access its individual dashboard, then click and drag to zoom in on choke points and get more detail. Comprehensive network data, including inbound and outbound traffic, is available on the Network tab, and disk writes and free space on the Disks tab, while the Process Explorer displays usage statistics for individual processes. The System Info tab shows listening services, active connections, and available updates. Adding Longview to a system is easy. Just click the button, copy the one-line installation command, then run the command on your Linux system to complete the process. The agent will begin collecting data and sending it to Longview. Then the graphs start rolling. Use Longview to gain visibility into your servers, so when your website or app heats up, it stays up.
Citrix Zen Server gives you everything you need to integrate, manage, and automate a virtual data center, all on an enterprise-class, cloud-proven virtual platform, and at a third of the cost of other solutions. But why even bother with virtualizing your server infrastructure in the first place? Well, let's say you have a traditional one server to one application architecture, but you're running out of resources and performance is suffering. Once you order new server hardware, you'll wait for delivery. Configure it, install your business application, stage and test the server, and finally, add it to your production farm. If you've been through this process before, you know it can take weeks or even months. You also know it's a manually intensive process that will burden your team every time you outgrow your current setup. With a virtual server solution, you could accomplish all of that in less than half a day. Server virtualization software separates the OS and application from the underlying server hardware. And with multiple virtual machines on a single server, you can use each of them to run different OSs and applications. This makes it possible to move your virtual machines from one piece of hardware to another whenever you want, to maximize utilization, simplify maintenance, or recover from a hardware failure, and without slowing down your applications or users. Clearly, server virtualization provides big benefits, and Citrix Zen Server provides even more. Since it's built on an open platform, Zen Server plays well with your existing hardware, storage systems, and IT management software, as well as with the industry's leading cloud service providers. Best of all, you can get started by downloading a fully functional, production-ready version of Zen Server for free. After a 10-minute installation process, you'll see how easy it is to start virtualizing your workloads and automating your IT management processes. And when you're ready for a richer set of management tools, just upgrade to one of the premium editions of Zen Server. So whether you're interested in virtualizing servers for the first time, expanding your server virtualization footprint, or moving server workloads to the cloud, download and install Zen Server today and see how it can help you simplify your IT environment. Citrix Zen Server. Do more. Don't spend more.